I was kicked out at 8 for getting a C+, but years later a hospital report revealed what they really tried to cover up and why they never wanted me in the first place. When I was 8 years old, my parents tossed me out of the house like I was yesterday's trash. I wandered alone through the night until my aunt found me hours later, sobbing under a street lamp. I'll never forget that night, not because I was scared, but because it's the night I realized my own parents had given up on me. Hi, my name is Clara Reynolds, and I'm 24 years old. But this story starts long before I became an adult. It started 16 years ago in Portland, Oregon, in a house that looked perfect on the outside but was empty and cold on the inside. My parents, Daniel and Veronica Reynolds, were high-powered corporate lawyers with an obsession for perfection. They had sharp minds, expensive taste, and hearts colder than the Oregon winter. They lived in a house that resembled a showroom more than a home. Every corner spotless, every decoration deliberate. Everything in their life was flawlessly arranged. Everything, except me. My younger brother, Ryan, was their pride and joy. He had Veronica's wit, Daniel's charisma, and a natural talent for everything he touched. If he so much as recited the alphabet, they'd throw him a parade. Me? I was the background noise, the extra piece in a perfect puzzle that never quite fit. If I brought home a B+, it was a catastrophe. If Ryan got an A-, they threw a celebratory dinner. When I asked for help with my homework, they told me to figure it out. When Ryan asked, they hired a private tutor with a master's degree. I was always the mistake they didn't know how to love. I tried harder. Every day, I studied like my life depended on it. Maybe I believed that if I worked hard enough, they'd finally see me the way they saw him. That they'd smile at me, maybe even hug me and tell me I mattered. But all I ever got was silence when I succeeded and punishment when I failed. Then came the night everything changed. I had just come home from school, my backpack dragging behind me like an anchor. I had taken a math test I'd studied for every night that week, sacrificing cartoons, sleep, even meals. But despite everything, I got a C+. When I walked in and saw their expressions, I knew what that meant. "She's a disgrace," my mom hissed from the living room. Her voice cut through the air like a razor. "We've given her everything, and this is how she repays us." "She's hopeless," my father added coldly. "She doesn't belong in this family." I froze in the hallway, my hands clutching that crumpled paper as if it could still save me. My heart thudded so loudly I thought they might hear it. Then came the sentence that would gut me for years. "Maybe it's time she left." I couldn't believe it. I was 8. 8. But they meant it. Later that night, they called me into the living room. My father sat with his arms crossed. My mother stood tall, like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "Clara, we're done," my dad said without emotion. "You failed to meet our expectations." My voice barely left my lips. "What does that mean?" "It means," my mother said, "you don't belong here." I begged. I dropped to my knees. "Please, I'll be better. I swear." And then, she hit me. A full swing across the face. My head snapped sideways. My vision blurred. But worse than the pain was the look in her eyes. "Cold. Final. Get out," she said. I looked to my dad, hoping he'd stop her. He didn't even blink. I ran upstairs, packed what little I had into a tiny rolling suitcase, and walked down the stairs, past the people who were supposed to love me. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't ask me where I'd go. My mom held the door open like she was taking out the trash. I walked into the night with nothing but a bag, a bruised cheek, and a shattered heart. The streets of Portland were unfamiliar in the dark, cold, and too quiet. I walked until my legs gave out and I sat under a flickering street lamp, trying to pretend this was just a bad dream. Hours passed. My skin burned with cold, my stomach howled with hunger. I couldn't stop shaking. I didn't even hear the footsteps until someone said my name. "Clara." I looked up. It was Aunt Lila. She took one look at my face, my suitcase, my bruised skin, and pulled me into a hug so warm I collapsed into it. That was the first real hug I'd had in years. And I cried. I cried so hard I thought I'd run out of tears. But Lila just held me. "You're safe now," she whispered. "You're safe." Lila wrapped her coat around me and led me to her car like I was something fragile. I kept waiting for her to start asking questions, but she didn't. She didn't lecture or demand to know what happened. She just drove. The heat from the car made my face sting where my mother had slapped me. But I didn't cry anymore. I felt empty, like a battery drained to its last flicker. When we got to her apartment, small, cluttered, warm, I barely made it through the door before collapsing onto her couch. She brought out an old comforter and wrapped me up, then made a pot of soup. Not the kind that comes from a can, real soup, with chopped vegetables and actual flavor. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I finished the bowl in less than 5 minutes. She didn't press, just listened as I finally started talking, piecing together what had happened. How I got kicked out. How my mom hit me. How Ryan got everything while I got forgotten. Lila clenched her jaw so tightly I thought she might shatter her own teeth. I always knew they were cold, but this? She took a breath, composing herself. You're not going back. Not ever. I slept in her guest room that night, still wrapped in the comforter, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what would happen if I failed someone. In the morning, she made me scrambled eggs and toast. Basic, but to me it tasted like the world's finest meal. Then she looked me in the eye and said, Clara, you're going to live with me now. That's not up for debate. I was still scared, unsure if I'd done something wrong, if this kindness would vanish like it always had. What if I mess up again? I whispered. Lila just smiled. Then we deal with it together. She enrolled me in a new school under her guardianship. At first, I hated it. Every time a teacher raised their voice, I flinched. I sat in the back of every class and kept my head down. I'd been trained to believe I was a failure in progress, that nothing I did would ever be enough. But Lila kept showing up. Parent-teacher conferences, band recitals, every scraped knee and sore throat. And slowly, I stopped expecting love to come with a price tag. I studied, not to prove myself, but because I actually wanted to. I found I liked biology. I got into drawing again, something my parents had called a waste of time. I wasn't perfect. Sometimes I still heard their voices in my head, telling me I was useless. But I had someone new now to drown them out. Ryan didn't contact me. Neither did my parents. For years. And then, on a quiet Sunday night, I got a text. Ryan, Clara, can we talk? I stared at my phone like it had turned to stone. I hadn't heard from him in almost 6 years. My hands trembled. Lila, who was sitting across from me doing a crossword, looked up and raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? She asked. I hesitated. It's Ryan. She didn't say anything. Just gave me a nod, the kind that meant, your call. I typed back, sure. What's going on? He replied instantly. Ryan, can we meet? Please. I need to get out of here. That's when I felt something I never expected to feel again, concern. I hadn't heard from him in years, hadn't even allowed myself to miss him. But that message hit different. It didn't sound like the golden boy I used to know. We met the next day at a little diner across town. I didn't know what to expect. Apology, denial, fake tears. But when Ryan walked in, he looked like a ghost. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't shaved. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down across from me and stared at his coffee like it held the answers to the universe. I can't breathe in that house, he said. I didn't say anything. They won't let me do anything I want. Dad ripped up my application to art school. Said I was wasting my God-given talents. That shocked me. Art school? Ryan? He rubbed his temples. I told them I didn't want to go to law school. They said if I didn't follow the plan, they'd cut me off. I don't know what to do. I should have been smug. I should have laughed, said, now you know how it feels. But I didn't. Because I saw something familiar in his face, something I used to see in the mirror. Fear. He was still inside the prison I escaped. And without thinking, I said, come live with me and Lila. He looked stunned. You do that? After everything? I nodded. You weren't the one who threw me out. And just like that, something shifted. The golden boy was finally breaking free. Ryan moved in with us the next week, bringing nothing but a duffel bag and the weight of a childhood he'd finally stopped pretending was perfect. At first, things were awkward. We tiptoed around each other like strangers in a shared hotel room. But slowly, the layers peeled back. I'd catch him drawing in the guest room. Tiny, intricate sketches of birds, forests, old buildings. Nothing like the future attorney our parents had molded. For the first time, I saw Ryan, not the version our parents had built, but the person trapped beneath it. One evening, he handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a sketch of me, sitting at the kitchen table, elbows on my textbooks, a tiny smile playing on my lips. You always looked like you were building your own world, he said. Something inside me cracked a little. For years I thought he never saw me. Now I knew better. But just as things were beginning to feel safe, A memory crept up on me like a shadow I hadn't noticed. It came to me out of nowhere, like a scene I didn't remember filming suddenly playing on a screen behind my eyelids. It was a memory from when I was 5. My parents had thrown a dinner party for Daniel's law partners. I was told to stay upstairs, but I remember peeking through the staircase rails, my little hands gripping the wood. There was laughter, clinking glasses, and music. Then the doorbell rang. I saw Ryan, just a toddler then, wandering toward it. I remember calling out his name, but he opened the door anyway. There was a man in a brown trench coat, holding a thick folder. My dad stormed in seconds later, face pale. He didn't even greet the man, just snatched the folder, slammed the door, and dragged Ryan back into the house. I hadn't thought about that moment in almost 2 decades. But now, sitting on the couch with Ryan dozing off beside me, it slammed into me like a punch to the gut. Do you remember? A man in a brown coat. I asked him. Ryan stirred. What? I explained the memory. At first, he shook his head. Then his face changed. Slowly, like something was clicking into place. Wait, he said. There was a box in Dad's study. A locked one. I saw him open it once when I was about 9. He swallowed hard. It had files in it. One of them had your name. There was a photo of you in the hospital. My blood ran cold. What hospital? He looked terrified now. I don't know. You were younger, like 4 or 5. There was a bandage on your head. I only saw it for a second before he slammed the box shut. The room tilted. The world around me blurred. I didn't remember being in the hospital. But suddenly I remembered something else. A noise. A crash. My head hitting something hard. Screaming. Then silence. And my mother's voice, low and shaking. We'll fix this. She's just a child. She won't remember. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Was that the first time they tried to get rid of me? Was I always just a problem they were trying to erase? I wanted answers. And deep inside, I knew. If I didn't dig now, the past would swallow me whole. I didn't sleep that night. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the image, a locked box in Dad's study, a photo of me in a hospital bed with a bandage on my head, and Ryan's voice whispering. You were younger, maybe 4 or 5. That box wasn't just holding papers. It was holding secrets, ones I was never supposed to know. The next morning, I sat on Lila's balcony with a cup of cold coffee and my heart pounding in my throat. Ryan joined me, looking like he hadn't slept either. Do you remember anything else? I asked. He hesitated. Just Dad yelling that night. Something about a staircase. And Mom saying, if anyone finds out, it's over. I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. A staircase. I remembered running once. Fast, too fast. Then the slippery wood, the sickening drop, and the blinding pain. But no one had ever mentioned it. No cast. No hospital photos. No explanations. And now I knew why. That afternoon, I called a lawyer Lila trusted. A woman named Jenna McKee, who worked with abuse survivors and wasn't afraid to dig into dark corners. I told her what I remembered, what Ryan saw, and what we were starting to suspect. Within a week, she helped me obtain my medical records. When they arrived, I opened the thick envelope with trembling hands. My fingers brushed over words that should have come from a horror novel, not my childhood. Patient presented with head trauma consistent with a fall or potential blunt force impact. Child reported falling downstairs, but was visibly distressed when questioned in front of guardian, mother. Referred to Child Protective Services for further review. There it was. They'd reported it. Someone had tried to protect me once. But the file ended abruptly. No follow-up. No notes on any investigation. Just a final sentence. Case closed, parental explanation accepted. I sat in the living room, my hands shaking, reading it over and over. They'd gotten away with it. Whatever happened that night when I was 4, they'd buried it. Erased it from my life like it never occurred. No one ever told me. And when I got older, when I wasn't as easy to control, they just threw me out instead. I was never meant to find this. And yet I had. Ryan came into the room and saw the file in my hands. His eyes scanned the page, and then he sat beside me, completely silent. You were right, he whispered. They never wanted you to remember. I looked at him and saw something raw and unfamiliar in his eyes, guilt. I didn't protect you, he said. Back then, I didn't know how. You were a kid too, I replied. And you're here now. But it didn't make the rage disappear. I wasn't just kicked out. I'd been silenced. Lied to. My injury, my pain, had been swept away like broken glass hidden under a rug. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to bury it again. I wasn't going to let them win by pretending this never happened. I had a right to confront the people who tried to erase me. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. I wanted to look them in the eyes and ask the question that had haunted me since the day I packed my suitcase and left. Why didn't you want me? I didn't want to go back to that house. But I had to. Lila tried to talk me out of it. So did Ryan. But some ghosts don't leave until you look them in the eye and tell them they don't scare you anymore. So I drove there alone. The house looked exactly the same. Pristine lawn, white shutters, perfect hedges, a facade so clean it could have been a stock photo for the American dream. I stood at the door, heart thundering, and rang the bell. It was Daniel, my father, who answered. He looked older, paler, but the eyes were the same. Cold, precise. He opened the door like he'd been expecting someone else. And when he saw me, he didn't speak. He just stepped aside. Clara, my mother, sat in the living room, reading a magazine like she wasn't the villain of my childhood. She looked up, startled. Clara. I walked in and closed the door behind me. No hug, I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She stood slowly, adjusting her cardigan. You shouldn't have come. I came for answers. Daniel crossed his arms. This again? You've made your little life, Clara. Let the past go. I was 4, I said, stepping forward. You told the hospital I fell. But that's not what happened, is it? Silence. Clara flinched. Daniel's jaw tightened. I remember it now, I continued. The staircase. The screaming. The man with the file. And I saw the report. You knew Child Protective Services opened a case. Cara's face went blank. A mask. We explained it. You tripped. It was an accident. Then why did you tell them I was confused? Why did you shut it down? Her voice rose. Because we had to. Do you think a call like that wouldn't ruin our reputations? Daniel cut in. You want to destroy your family over a childhood injury. I want the truth. I shouted. You lied to doctors. You lied to me. You tried to rewrite everything so you wouldn't have to look bad. Daniel stepped forward. You were difficult. Always crying. Always questioning. We didn't know what else to do. And hitting me was the answer? My voice cracked. Clara said nothing. Was that what happened on the stairs? I whispered. The silence that followed was worse than any answer. It was confirmation. They hadn't just failed me. They'd hurt me, and then they made me forget it. I came here to see if there was anything left, I said quietly. Anything worth saving. But there's not. I turned to the door. You're still our daughter, Clara said, almost pleading. No, I said, hand on the knob. I used to be. And I left. It's been 3 years since that day. Ryan and I still live with Lila, though now we call it our home. The Anderson Community Center is thriving. Every week, kids walk through our doors, some scared, some angry, all looking for something better. And we give it to them. A place, a purpose, a second chance, just like Lila gave me. Sometimes, I still think about that house. The staircase. The version of me that was never supposed to make it. But I did. And not just survive. I created something good out of the ruins. And I'm not going back. Not ever.